Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. We're going to cover everything. We're going to cut through all the propaganda, give it to you straight from left, right, and center. The opinions are what counts. Hello, everybody. We're broadcasting from Venice, Florida on Trump verdict weekend. Boy, I got to tell you, this country will never be the same. But I got to tell you one thing, folks. We've got two great guests coming to us behind enemy lines in the blue state of Connecticut. I'd like to welcome back Lee Elsey and Joe Visconti. Lee and Joe, happy to have you with me on verdict weekend.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, Lee, let me start with you. Okay, so verdict came out. What has been the reaction of your listeners? And I don't want to put words in your mouth or mince anything. My guess is they're ticked off.
Anger, astonishment, not believing this verdict, I think, is fair to say. You know, I don't want to be over dramatic, but this literally is, I think it's a fight for the soul of the nation. I mean, just think about what we're watching. You know, me and Joe talked about this earlier this week, about how you've got this ticky-tack minor infraction at best, and they have weaponized the Judiciary Department to go after the former President of the United States. It's astonishing to me. But yes, anger without question is the number one reaction that I get from the listeners. They're fiercely fired up, and I'll tell you, July 11th is a big day. That's the sentencing day. And I'm not really sure what's going to happen after that day. I'm actually concerned with the safety of the country.
Joe, how do you see it? I mean, you're both up there in deep blue Connecticut. The reactions, though, you know, give me your thought. You're an activist. You talk to people. You see people of all political stripes, Republican, Democrat, Independent. You know, what are people saying to you?
A lot of people are saying what I was thinking, and I actually said on your show a couple of weeks ago that it would probably be a hung jury until we heard and saw the 55 pages of the judge's instructions to the jury. At that point, there was no way, there was nothing but conviction. That's all that could come. So we kind of had it. We would have had it right but everything they do is just corruption after corruption, passing laws that fit their fancy, and I got to tell you, I don't, and people I'm talking to do not believe he won't be in jail. They do not believe anymore after yesterday that everything is possible. Everything is probable that they'll do, not possible. And so we've got to get prepared for them to. And I think if they do that, and I believe they will, they'll put him in Rikers. I don't think they'll put Donald Trump with an ankle bracelet at Trump Tower while he waits for appeal. I think that there'll be 3 million Trump supporters covering the streets of Manhattan at Trump Tower and Fifth Avenue. You won't be able to move, and the New York cops will let it happen. So they can't leave him there. They're going to have to put him in Rikers and in a cell that's 6x9 with Secret Service outside. Maybe the cameras will work, maybe they won't. This is real. There's no way to even anticipate, we'll just wait. There is no wait and see. My suggestion, and I actually called his campaigns of people I know and said, listen, tell him not to go back. What is he going to get? He's going to get cited for a failure to appear in court for sentencing. Good. Don't go to New York. Don't go anywhere in New York. Stay away from New York. They're not going to send people to Florida to get him. DeSantis will block it. He can travel the whole country, and the Secret Service will keep any New York State trooper that's trying to get him in Texas or Michigan, wherever he has a rally. Don't go. It's a setup. Don't go. You won't get out of jail. The Supreme Court, you can't trust that they'll rule. You just can't. I know it sounds like law breaking, but Thomas Jefferson, when tyranny becomes law, rebellion is a duty.
Lee, there's a lot of people that agree with Joe. I mean, after conviction on all charges, you've seen a lot of reports in social media, print media, legal experts are saying that based upon traditional sentencing guidelines under New York law, at most he should get probation. But with this judge and the fact that it's really people beyond the control of this judge calling the shots, there is a real possibility that 4 or 5 days before the Republican convention, the nominee of a major party in this country may not be able to attend the convention.
you hear it out loud and you can't believe it, right? You hear that out loud and you say to yourself, okay, so what did he do? What was the major transgression that Trump may have done in order to get him to this position in his life and possibly be sentenced to prison? And when you think about it, even if all of it were to be 100% accurate and true, and he paid $100,000+ to a porn star to shut her mouth, etc., and even if all that were true, this is clearly a one party going after another. This is the kind of stuff that happens in Nicaragua. This is the kind of stuff that happens in El Salvador. This is the kind of stuff that happens in these third world countries, not in the United States of America. And Joe is right. Again, this could get very, very dangerous very quickly. I hate to be that guy who yells the sky is falling, but maybe, the sky is falling. You can't have this happen in the United States of America. We cannot have a situation where somebody takes their political power, that's Biden and his cronies, and directs the full force of their legal, let's say, henchmen to go after a former president of the United States. I mean, it's just a terrible precedent to set. And again, one that I think is unlike anything we've ever seen, certainly in this country in the history. But Joe makes an interesting point, one that I hadn't even thought about, Joe. So I think it's an interesting idea for him just not to go back to New York after July 11th. I mean, you actually make a pretty good point. It's not a horrible idea for him to do that. I mean, he's probably not going to win New York anyway, so what's the difference? But it's an interesting thought to have him sort of just leave there, and if they come down to try to get him in Florida, DeSantis will just say no to that.
This doesn't remind me of the United States. This reminds me of the Soviet Union, Russia, 1996. Folks, let me give you a little history lesson. At that point, Russia had an ailing leader who was sick. There was a very charismatic candidate running to head Russia at the time. He was ahead in the polls. What did they do? They smeared him. They trumped up false charges, horrific things, intimidation, threats, payoffs, the same way the Russians currently do business around the world. Well, at that point, the sick, ailing leader of Russia, who was then president, was reelected. Shortly after the election, massive heart attack, incapacitated. Who's calling the shots in the country at that point? We don't really know. Who emerged from that? Vladimir Putin, who is still there 28 years later. Folks, that was in Russia, not the United States. And as you mentioned, Lee, it's happened in third world democracies all across the country, all across the globe. So this is not going to be a shock at all. But bear in mind, despite what all these pundits and legal analysts are saying, this judge literally has the power to put him in jail. Now, is that the likely outcome? Joe Visconti, I'll share this with you. A lot of people here in Venice, including a high-ranking general that used to be the national security advisor, they believe that is exactly where we're going. Is that your opinion, Joe? I mean, are we going to see 4 days?
We are. Yeah, we are. Mark and you'd have to, and I've been really stoic about this. I was on Lee's show this morning, very stoic about it, not emotional, not promoting violence. But if they let Trump go to Trump Tower, I just think that the public will swarm if he's locked up there and he can't, politic and campaign. And so they can't take the risks of having the streets of Fifth Avenue flooded with millions of, because it would be Occupy Trump Tower, like Occupy Wall Street. It would just be Trump people taking over the streets. And I believe the New York will happen. So they would be able to clear it out. And so they'd have to put him on record somewhere where the public can't get. And my fear, again, is that even if it's a day or two before the Supreme Court could hear it, he's going to be a 6-minute cell, no concierge, no food that he's used to eating, no Twitter, no communications, lawyers, a response, nothing. and they'll block it out. And think about this, maybe, and I've been backstage with him and worked with the Secret Service across the Northeast in 16, and there's probably maybe 12 people beyond that duty. 12 people in a state prison like that, where they could just have the guards overpower the Secret Service when they move him around in the prison. God knows what, and we'll never know. Like Epstein, the cameras went down, the guards went home. We don't know what happened. That's the environment they're going to put him in, even for a day. No, no, no. You do not go back, Donald Trump, to New York. And actually, when you're the president of the United States, you come in with the military and you straighten New York and Chicago and all the criminal states around and do something with it, because all they could get you on is failure to appear in court. And what's that crime going to be? 4 years in prison to not come back to get sentenced? Come and get him. Send a bounty hunter. Not going to happen. Forget about it. They're going to do this. There's no stopping them. Bank on it. Put your money on it. And it's a question is, will Trump become George Washington? Will he become Thomas Jefferson? Will he become the founding fathers and become a criminal on the run in New York like George Washington was? Right in New York, Washington. Before he was president, was on the run, hiding out from the British. In this case, the British are the deep state.
Well, I think the issue that we're facing as Americans, it's bigger than Donald Trump. Lee, as our headline said, given what just happened to a former president of the United States, the predecessor to the current president, Joe Biden, the bigger question, will we have an election come this November? I mean, that's on a lot of people's minds right now. And a lot of that, I believe, Lee, it's going to hinge on what happens on July 11th.
We better have an election, I'll tell you that. That's the one issue I always talk about on my show, which is the most, I think the one thing we have to have in order to have a free society, free people, and get away from chaos is a free and fair election. It was a question whether or not that happened in 2020, but if they decide no election in 2024, all bets are off. Then you've got absolute total anarchy and chaos, and I'm sorry to say rightfully so, because even me, I'm going to get to the streets and I'm going to have my voice heard over and over again, whatever it takes. If you try to shut down free and fair elections, there's going to be a huge problem nationwide. I tell you, what I can't get away from in this whole scenario is this. I understand there are people who like Trump, and then there are people who don't like Trump. Clearly, that's the case. I can't believe that there are people in this country right now, left of center, Democrats, however you want to label them, that they look at this and they think this is okay. It's so hard for me to believe that American citizens in 2024 think that what is going on, even if he's guilty, which again, there's a question as to how you want to sort of format that, but you can just swallow hard and say, oh, well, this is okay because it's Donald Trump and we all hate, or this side of the aisle hates Donald Trump. This is not okay. And I think people on the other side of the aisle need to start speaking up to recognize how horrific and how dangerous this precedent that was set yesterday. It's a terrible, terrible thing to see in this country. Terrible.
Lee, I could not agree with you more. And what really disgusts me, and I haven't had time to see a lot of it, but I have seen some of the clips that have emerged, mainstream media figures, which outside of certain networks like Fox News, Newsmax, and a handful of others, they are gleeful at this verdict. I'm not hearing any of them in a stoic voice saying, well, it's terrible this has happened. I mean, they are literally almost standing up and clapping. And to me, that is a big problem. I mean, it's incomprehensible to me how we as a country, with a George Soros funded prosecution team who went out and campaigned on doing what they've done, when other courts, as Trump said in his speech yesterday, the Southern District, well-respected court, they elected not to bring charges. Folks, this is a travesty of the highest order. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Joe, same question to you. Will we have an election, the implications? And then, folks, we're going to get into some of the what ifs knowing that the Democrats will do anything to remain in power. Be back shortly.
Sounds rolling. All 3 cameras. We're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn, one of America's most treasured military heroes. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Go to Patriot TV, click on Store, and grab a once-in-a-lifetime chance to own a treasured piece of American history. And get your own personal download link to watch America's most talked-about movie, as well as a DVD hand-signed by General Michael Flynn. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store. Incredible savings and a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Folks, I tell you one thing, go out and support General Michael Flynn. Take care, buy the DVD. I've seen the movie 3 times. It will bring you to tears. It is a very emotional movie. You will thoroughly enjoy it. General Flynn went through what Donald Trump is going through right now, and it's someone who definitely can relate to what the president's going to. Pick up his DVD. He's a great American. All right, Joe, back to you. We were talking about, will we have an election? I heard Lee's perspective. Give me your perspective.
Well, if he's in Rikers and they put him in Rikers on July 11th, whatever day they sentence him, in other words, when he has to go in, if that's what they do, I think you're going to see the country unravel. I think we're going to see the country unravel, and God knows what's going to happen, because it's not going to be pretty. There's too many people. You know, on January 6th, I was doing covering your show at the U.S. Capitol, and I watched a couple 100,000 people lose their mind. Most of them didn't, but they kind of like, we're gonna, and probably 5,000 people just lost their mind. And so they're going to look at this and go, will we have an election? They won't trust anything. They won't trust he's not going to be killed. So you're going to have enough people in the country that are going to, I believe, mobilize. And this is what the left wants. This is what the deep state wants. And this isn't pretending. There's no more conspiracies. This is real. It's all happening in real time. There's no more tinfoil on the right wing of the party anymore. So I believe there's going to be violence. Don't promote it. I've worked for 20 years in politics, running Party Connecticut, doing everything I could so we would not have violence. But as far as the election goes, if there's violence, you won't have an election. It'll just lead to the summer. It'll catch fire like cancer, and God knows how it'll spread. People are just going to lose their mind. And if he's in Rikers, expect anything. Expect anything. You won't be able to contain the country if he's in prison, because they won't be able to hear from him in July, in August, in September, in October. No, we won't even know what's happening.
It's a scenario, Joe Visconti, that I don't think any American could have conceived that would possibly be happening. Something that, to borrow Lee's term, even if he was guilty of everything, these are nothing more than misdemeanors that they've enhanced into a felony. And Lee, 34 convictions on every damn one of them. I mean, a lot of people were speculating, well-respected law professors that appear on national cable network shows and national networks, not only conservative, moderate, even some liberals, said it's going to be tough to convict Trump, when the primary testimony was based upon a congenital liar, Michael Cohen.
Right.
So, Lee, 34 counts, all guilty verdicts. We've talked about will we have an election? I'm in your camp. I hope we have an election. But the question is, who's going to be the Republican candidate, or will it be Trump, even if he is sitting behind bars?
Well, as far as every constitutional attorney that I've talked to, and I've had a couple of them on, they don't find anything in the Constitution that would prohibit him from running from a jail cell if it got to that point. I will say this about the 30 plus counts, felony counts. I mean, the way the judge directed the jury to look at the case, it made it almost impossible for him to be found innocent. As we found that out deeper into the trial, then I'm like you. I thought in the beginning, there's no way that he's going to be found guilty. There's going to be one of these individuals on the jury that's going to say, no, this is absolutely a joke. But the way that they had to look at it, and one person could think, well, you're guilty here, and another person could think you're guilty on that charge, you're guilty over here on this, and then it all got sort of balled up together. And then you've got the guilty verdict on the 34 counts in the felony charges. So, unfortunately, you've got this progressive judge who's funded Biden's campaign in the past, and now he literally has not only the freedom of Trump, but he's got the freedom of the country in the palm of his hand for July 11th when he decides to hand down a verdict. And as Joe has so articulately said earlier, why would they not put him in jail? They've gone through all this effort to get him into this spot. Of course they're going to find him not only guilty, but they're going to sentence him to some jail time without question.
Let me pose this question to you, Joe Visconti. If you didn't think he got a fair trial, what makes you think he's going to get a fair sentence?
Well, the other thing is, think about this. Biden said he'd do the debates. Of course he would. He knew this was in the pipeline. He knew this was happening. So he's going to do a debate in June, realizing that he can taunt Trump, whatever. But they knew the timeline. They know exactly what's happening. They've laid it all out. It's the weaponization of intelligence, of judiciary is a weaponization of just about every aspect of our government. And here's something else. I spoke about this on Lee's radio show this morning. Government moves real slow, but I've never seen government move so fast in the last 8 years, and especially the last 4 years, turbocharged, where they can just mechanization from state to federal law, and there's no governing authority. Like Al Gore said when he rented the Lincoln bedroom, there was no governing authority. They said, I can't. And right now there's no governing authority except for the Supreme Court that could reach in, but can we count on them? We couldn't get 4 justices in 2020 to talk about the Texas lawsuit. Only 2, Gorsuch and Thomas. We didn't get 4. And it was so many things that were done in those swing states illegally with their constitution, but we couldn't get 4 because it was very difficult. They thought Black Lives Matter would burn America down. So will they act now with all of the potential violence coming from the right? Which I'm gonna invest in this concept that you're going to have violence. When people can't get justice, they put on a hood. I'm not saying we are right-wing extremist KKK, but people did that in the South. And so people put on a hood. You get snipers coming out. You have random acts of violence.
Yeah, but
there's no
Joe,
telling. I hate talking like this, but we're here. We're here right now. We are here.
But let me clarify. Let me clarify one thing. There is no advocacy for that whatsoever.
No, of course not.
And then we cannot have that in the United States of America. Yes, we can have peaceful protest, and I think that I would encourage people to peacefully protest, but under no circumstance ever do we advocate that type of situation.
Well,
under
the problem
any
is
circumstances, because we do not want to put ourselves to the level of some of these other people. Yeah. Look, there's 2 conventions coming up. Chicago for the Democrats, Milwaukee for the Republicans. They're not that far apart. Joe, Lee, you know it as well as I do. There are going to be agitators on both sides at both of these venues. And we can sit here and put our head in the sand and say, oh, I hope there's nothing really going to happen. You and I, all 3 of us know damn good and well, there will be.
Mark, Mark, that's exactly the point. The confluence of events from 4th of July weekend, a lot of drinking, people going crazy or whatever in Chicago. And then you've got Chicago. And then you've got this thing July 11th, right after, 6 days later, and all the stuff that's going to happen. So that's what I was talking about. The boiling points of the people, the agitation. God knows it's not going to take a lot of people. So I'm praying, and I've been praying on every day since this happened, that people keep their head on straight, don't lose their mind. This is a political process. Donald Trump can decide not to go into the lion's den on July 11th, and I hope he does. Then the onus would be on him. But we don't want him in prison. We don't want the public to be even tempted to be violent. And I believe those on the left do.
Yeah, I concur with you. I mean, Lee, we're coming into it. We talked about this. Okay, we're going to have a debate. I think, what's the date? June 27th-ish, somewhere around there, where Presidents Trump and Biden are going to debate. And then, as Joe mentioned, we got the holiday weekend coming up. Let's talk about two things here. One, Trump's under a gag order. He mentioned that multiple times on his press conference yesterday. How is that going to function when he's under literally a gag order? How is that going to affect his campaign? I mean, can he talk about issues? He just can't talk about the judge, the case. I mean, shed some light on this for our viewers, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, Lee, about what Trump can and can't say.
Well, yeah, I was surprised that the gag order is somewhat still in effect from everything that I've read today. I thought that as soon as the case was over, it was, open season for Trump once again. But what I'm getting is dribs and drabs of, him having the shackles still on and not able to say a lot of the things. I want to, if you don't mind, I just want to back up for a second, because I want to ask you both a question, and not to sort of interrupt the flow of the conversation. But I've had a couple of high-ranking folks on the radio broadcast with me in days, recently in the last couple months. And my question to them was, okay, everybody wants things to be peaceful. You want them to be peaceful. Joe wants them to be peaceful. I want them to be peaceful. But at what point in time does that no longer work? Like, I phrased my question to one of the colonels who's part of the Heritage Foundation, and I said to him, when do you pick up the guns? When do you start to fight back? Now, again, not advocating for it, but the question I think is still floating around out there it's not answered yet. Like, how much do we let them pile on top of us before something gives? And again, I'm sorry if I derailed the flow of the conversation, but
let me tell you, Lee, that's a great question. Let me throw out two scenarios to address your question. Okay. And folks, don't go off flash polls, because a lot of times they're wrong. Let's wait over the next week, see how the polling turns out to be from multiple sources. But Lee, I want to share this with you. And President Trump said this on his presser yesterday when he went out about 11 o'clock and was talking about the case. Flash poll that came out, I think it was from The Guardian or one of these outfits, Trump +6. Okay, everybody, I don't know if that's an accurate number. And I always advocate, let's give it a little bit of time. Let's see what other polling outfits come out to be. But Lee, I will share this with you. If that poll is accurate and Donald Trump is, let's cut it in half. Let's say he's +3. A +3 on the national vote, Donald Trump would be swept into office in an overwhelming landslide. When Joe Biden defeated him, and I know some people question it, but when Joe Biden won the 2020 election, he won the popular vote by a little over 3.5 to 4 points. Okay. So if we have a 6 to 7 point swing and Donald Trump is up in that range, 3, 4, 5, 6 points post debate with Joe Biden, Lee, I believe there's going to be two sets of pressure that's going to be applied here. There's going to be a hell of a lot of pressure by liberal activists, those Soros-funded groups, to, instead of doing the proper sentence for Trump, which would be probation, a fine, something along those lines, for the fact he's never had any criminal record. He's 77 years old. These are really misdemeanors, not felonies, assuming, the guilty verdict. So if the judge did the right thing and did that, I think we can get through this period with relative peace, subject to what happens at the convention. If he goes into this post-debate era with Joe Biden and he's sitting here up in the polls 3 to 6 points, and that judge ends up incarcerating Trump for some period of time, which would overlap the election, I think there's a chance all hell could break loose. Now, that's just an opinion based on polls. I hope that doesn't happen, but I've been around. I've seen volatile conventions, not trying to date ourselves, but when I read the history books, 1968 was a pretty bad convention for the Democrats. Oh, by the way, where was it? It was in Chicago. Oh, by the way, a sitting U.S. president did not make it. Okay, someone else was put in. So if Biden looks weak in this debate, and you and I all know there's a good chance that could happen, and Trump's up in these polls, Joe, is that going to be a precursor towards Democrats leaning on the judge to impose a more severe penalty on Trump?
Yes, it is. And I will never even think that they'll let him go with probation or even an ankle brace at Trump Tower. This is what I'm saying to you. What's stopping them now? There is only one scenario if he does go in to sentencing and they put him in Rikers that afternoon. And it's already provisions have been made with the mayor. And if anyone that's listening remembered that about 2 weeks ago, they're making room or whatever that means. What will happen is the Supreme Court is the only avenue that could pick this up like they did Gore Bush because he can't campaign. The country's this could lead to violence. This is why the Supreme Court did not hear. I'll repeat myself again. 2020, the Texas lawsuit with 20 states because they were afraid, I believe, that there would be anarchy if they actually did their job. So in this case, it's the other side. So I can't even say side. I think it would just be random acts of violence if that occurred. And so let's pretend it happens. They cuff him. They put him in Rikers. Will the Supreme Court, the best question to answer Lee's question is, will the Supreme Court pick this up and vacate this completely illegal trial? Will they do that or will they sit on their hands? Because they can, but will they?
Well, that's a really good. Yeah. Lee, let me do this. We got to take a quick break, but when we come back, I do want to address your point. And Joe, I want to address this Supreme Court piece because someone we're all familiar with, Mark Levin, had a theory on that, and we'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Be back shortly.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold.
Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 877-547-5743. That's 877-KIRK-PhD.
And we're back. Kirk Elliott, gold and silver. Gold's over $2,400 an ounce. Silver's over $32. A lot of people believe $3,000 gold, $50 silver's on its way. Pick up that phone and call Dr. Kirk Elliott. He's a terrific guy, great company, great advisor. All right, Lee, back to you. You had some thoughts right before the break on this very subject.
So yeah, I'm sorry about that. But you were talking about violence, the potential for violence, and sometimes you get the question, well, where's it going to come from? Who is going to, commit these kinds of acts of, you want to call it vengeance or revolution? I know for a fact, talking to them personally, there are groups all over the country, small groups, former law enforcement groups, former military. These people are patriots, true and true. Now, they don't want violence, but they're ready, guys. They're out there. And Joe, I bet you know who some of these folks are. They're here in our state of Connecticut. They'll pull me aside. They'll tell me, things that maybe they're not supposed to tell me, but, they're ready. And again, I'm not advocating for this, but I think people need to know that there are people out there ready to act if something goes really, really off the rails. I just wanted to throw that out there because sometimes I get asked that question, like, who are we talking about? Who's the we? Who's going to cause the violence? There are people out there. They're ready. They're ready to go.
Oh, Lee, I don't doubt it for a minute. I mean, when you look at the fact that we've had, 10 million people come across our southern border since Biden's been in office, and to put your head in the sand again and say, oh, well, there's no agitators, no terrorists, nobody that's done that. Oh, there's a lot of people that, could potentially get involved. So again, I don't think any bets are off the table right now, subject to what happens on that July 11th sentencing piece. Joe, I want to come back to your point here because I was listening last night, early this morning, to Mark Levin, and Mark's a constitutional lawyer, handles appeals cases before the Supreme Court, and he advocated that Trump's attorneys get this appeal process in sooner rather than later. There's an acknowledgement, Joe, that the appeals process itself, which normally would stay any type of jail time, that will likely drag out past the election. So going back to your analogy of Bush v. Gore, the Supreme Court had to intervene in that case. It's not something that could literally, to use your analogy of a slow government, judicial system, we don't have time here.
Yeah.
From what a lot of, and this isn't just conservative legal scholars, folks, a lot of people talking about all the many Swiss cheese holes in this case, the outright political persecution of Trump, the fact that certain defense angles were not allowed, 55 pages of jury instructions, not even being able to identify what the damn crime was, as Trump said, and I believe he's right about that. Levin was advocating a quick effort to get this case before the Supreme Court. Joe, I mean, I tend to agree with Mark Levin. He's a pretty sharp guy. Can Trump and his lawyers, or Republican, well, I'll call them super lawyers who practice at that level, get this case before the Supreme Court?
Well, I got a phone call yesterday into someone very, very close to Trump. And because I said, I'm just Joe, but tell him not to go back to New York. And he said the Supreme Court case application is already ready. So what day they put it in, how they do it, I think he's going to, like Dershowitz said Friday, I don't know if he's going to do it this weekend, but firing his legal team. And he has to get rid of them right now. Yeah, because Dershowitz was speaking all about the mistakes they made. And so he's probably going to a lawyer thing and figure out the new team to go to the Supreme Court. I hope he does that. That would be smart. I wouldn't wait for July 11th. It's just a confluence of events. So if we all pray, and I do believe in prayer, General Flynn believes in prayer. It does work. We prayed our way here to get this country. At least all of this is exposed. And I texted General Flynn a couple of weeks ago. I said, General, you and your family went through hell, and you went through hell. But if you weren't taken out, we would never have seen this. We would have never known what's behind the scenes. They would have blamed you years later, or Trump, or whatever. We would have never seen the unmasking. And if Elon Musk didn't come around to show us what Twitter was doing with the government and big tech, we wouldn't know that. So this has been 4 years of really unmasking them. They tried to unmask Trump and his children and his supporters. They've been unmasked. And so right now, the Supreme Court, I think at the right time, they'll know best, but I believe there's a new legal team coming in. We'll probably hear about it Monday or Tuesday.
Well, I had the privilege of watching General Flynn and Colonel McGregor earlier today on Patriot TV when they were discussing right after President Trump's news conference yesterday. And he's got some grave concerns about the justice system, the persecution of President Trump. He experienced it, folks. I mean, you can go see Flynn movie, but he literally was describing his experience when the government, who has more money than God, throws resources at you. Look, even Trump with his immense wealth, I mean, look what happened here. So, it's a tough road to hoe here, but I believe this, Joe. And you saw yesterday when they came out, Republican donors. I'm not talking about the billionaire class, average Republican donors literally broke Trump's bank. I mean, they shut down his internet feed, not intentionally. There was just too many people trying to donate. Lee, I think they raised, and again, this isn't about money, folks, but in the end, you have to have dough to run a presidential campaign. Lee, I think they raised $39 million just within the first 12 hours after that, ridiculous guilty verdicts crossed the wire. I mean, give me your thoughts on that.
It gives me hope, guys, right? So you got to figure that people cross the aisle to donate to Trump on behalf of this just egregious decision. So yeah, I think that's the one thing I took away from that, seeing 39 plus million bucks being donated to Trump in just a few hours. It's because people see this kangaroo court, which is exactly what it was, again, persecuting a political rival, and maybe, just maybe, the American people are beginning to wise up in those polls that you talked about, Mark, a couple minutes ago. Maybe, the 6% lead for Trump becomes 8, becomes 9, doesn't become 3, becomes 10. Maybe people finally see things for what they actually are. And again, there's never been a time where there's been a clearer misuse of power in this country, I think, than what we're witnessing right now. You've got a president under persecution for ticky-tack, Mickey Mouse types of crimes at best. And again, I think the people said to Trump yesterday, and maybe even they were talking to the Democrat Party, saying, "Yeah, we're not going to let this happen." So actually, that gave me a lot of hope. And maybe this is just the beginning. Maybe people actually start to wise up to all this.
Joe, I saw on some of the social media accounts where some billionaires on the Republican side of the equation are starting to step up and express their support for President Trump and their disdain for what happened, how the justice system was mobilized against the former president. I mean, you had people like Elon Musk coming out making fairly forceful statements. Steve Schwartzman, billionaire founder of Blackstone. I mean, there are some Republican billionaires that have stepped up for Trump, but it seems to me like the Democratic billionaires way outweigh the Republican billionaires. Joe, is it a fair statement to say all hands on deck, regardless of your economic stature, whether you're working class, executive, or billionaire status, we have to step up, all of us, and support President Trump and do whatever we can do to save this country and get this man elected, whether he's on probation, campaigning, or behind bars?
Yeah, it's all about money now. It's all about the Benjamins. Remember that one? All about the Benjamins. And I think that's going to come in. I believe the money will come now. But the bigger question is, these would have been, I'm not a lawyer, but in politics, you kind of almost like become a lawyer because everything is thrown at you. So legally, you can't do this. Legally, you can't do that. That's a good idea. Legally, you can't do it. But I think that the precedents that were set in New York, they're trying to establish these precedents. Of course, the case will be overturned. But the bigger question for the judicial system and how to repair it in the future is something that you see in the private sector and commercial sector, frivolous lawsuits. And so these are frivolous lawsuits by our government. And I believe there's going to be new laws coming down under the next Trump administration to stop frivolous lawsuits or put the onus on the general public to pay hefty fines if the government does what corporations do or individuals do to others. Frivolous lawsuit doesn't pertain to the government, but it's going to need to from here on out. They really dug a hole, but at the same time, this will be a protection for the general public. They went where, like Al Gore said, where there was no governing authority. There has to be a governing authority. You bring a frivolous lawsuit and smear even a political figure or public figure, and you bring it with the intensity and all of the things that are going to be written when the Supreme Court writes on this. This can't happen again to anyone. And the only way to do that is to really make the government or the local state governments afraid that if they take this up, things like this again, they're going to be held accountable financially.
Lee, it's my understanding that this is not a pardonable offense because it was brought in the state of New York. What does Donald Trump do now between June 1st and June 27th when they have this debate? And let's talk about things that may happen economically. We've got 2 wars waging overseas. Some of the numbers that came out weren't great. Trump talked about it today. The cost of owning a home, inflation, wide open southern border. I mean, what does Trump do now between today and June 27th when he gets on the stage to debate Joe Biden?
I think he keeps hammering the things you just talked about. I would distance myself from this decision. You know, you don't want to go back and continue to talk about the kangaroo court, bad decision, etc. I think, you know, you pound away at the economy, you pound away at the border in particular, you pound away at the crime over and over again. And, you know, I'm an idealist, right? So I think that, you know, we need great leadership. And to get that great leadership, in this case, we need the people of this country to realize that the leaders that are in power right now are doing a terrible, terrible job. And we have to engage, that we as a country, as constituents and citizens, have to engage in this political process with more fervor than we've ever had before. We've got to go to the local meetings, the local Republican meetings, and have your opinion heard, or at the very least, listen to what's being said. So as far as all that goes, a lot of the onus should come back on all of us, because it's going to be up to us as to whether or not who's going to be the president in 2024. But for Trump, I would stay away from the blame game, so to speak. Anybody who's paying any attention realizes that this whole trial was a joke, and that, you know, move forward. Let's talk about the issues, just issue, and go town to town, city to city, and sort of hammer away at that. And then once the first debate comes and Biden gets propped up on stage, people are going to see Biden for what he really is, a disaster.
Right. I think that's great advice, Lee. I don't know if President Trump can hold it in, but maybe between a combination of the gag order talking about the case and the fact that, look, the reality is this, and I've seen some early indications of this, saw it before the verdict. I'm seeing a little bit of it after the verdict. Overwhelming percentage of the American people, upwards of 90%, their mind is made up. They're either voting for Trump, that verdict's not going to change them one iota. They're voting for Biden, same analysis. Kennedy, Cornel West, Jill Stein. There's a very small sliver that I think actually matter right now. And Joe, as you and I have talked, it's really not a sliver on a national basis. It's a sliver of voters in 7 swing states, and really, in my opinion, only 3. Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Because I think Trump has a big enough lead in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia. Yeah. I mean, we even saw where New Hampshire might be in play. So folks, you're going to hear a lot of garbage through the mainstream media. That's why we're here at Patriot TV, to give you the real story. Joe, if it really comes down to a sliver of votes in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, I think Lee's given really good advice. Focus on the economy. Focus on the border. Focus on how much it costs to live, what it costs to go to a McDonald's, a Wendy's, a Burger, what it costs to go out doing anything, the price of gas. Joe, can he focus on the issues despite all this craziness and laser focus on the economy, the border? Can that get him across the finish line?
I think it does, but if Donald Trump goes rogue after July 11th and doesn't show up and goes rogue, I think what he's going to do, people won't believe it, but my gut feeling is he's going to unload on national secrets. He's going to unload on JFK. It sounds like conspiracy. He's going to unload publicly, maybe during the debate. He's going to come out and start to put out to the general public the state secrets and the things that have been done in this country by the CIA and by our own government. And that is going to anger the general public. They've been waiting a lifetime to hear these things, and he's kept them in his pocket. So be prepared for the trickling out of information. And I think the place to do it is right on the debate stage. Also, Joe Biden's secrets. He knows everything. General Flynn, as the National Security Council, was not there long enough, but he knows enough. So he's not the kind of person, but the president still has. This is why they want him for the Mar-a-Lago thing, because they know what he knows. They don't want him saying it, and there's nothing going to stop him. What are they going to bring something in? A lawsuit with another Jack Smith again in July, August? Another? He gave the secret out. Arrest him. Go ahead. The election will be over before you bring that case. So look for us, the unmasking of the establishment that Trump is going to do. Amazing man that he can keep those secrets privately under this kind of pressure. But I think the right ones delivered the right way. The general public is just going to be overwhelmed with feeling of relief. Aha, I knew it. And I knew my government was lying to us. And my government is doing this to him. Holy smokes, the government is the enemy. Oh, yeah. I think you're going to see a few of those, something people aren't thinking about.
All right, on that comment, Joe, we're going to take our final break. But when we come back, we're going to talk about some other what-if scenarios, other news of the day, the economies, the border, the war in Ukraine. Little known fact that's been in the news that nobody's talking about. We'll be back in 60.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying Patriot.tv. I'm Kira, and I am so excited to tell you about our new store. We have everything you could want to show your patriotism around your house. We've got artwork, we've got coffee mugs, there's health and beauty stuff, and even things to decorate with. I've got a few examples here just to give you a little look behind the scenes. First up, by the world-renowned artist Robert Holton, this is part of his Drizzle collection. Give you a better look at that. How cool is that Lady Liberty? Wouldn't that look great in your hallway? And there's even artwork you can wear on your body. God, Country, and Kin, amazing denim jacket for the ladies. Look at this detail and look at the back. Dangerous there with the twin pistols. And ladies, those are not just bullets, those are lipsticks. Yeah, you're dangerous all the way around, right? And there's also stuff you can put on your head. All about the cowboy core this year, right? Love these great hats they've got going. Check out the front and the detail on that with the longhorn. Lovely in the back, and it looks even better on. Yeehaw! Love to show my patriotism in a great cowboy hat. Check us out at the Patriot.tv store today. Join me there. So if you've got an itch to do a little shopping and show your patriotic spirit, click that link above that says store and join me there at the Patriot TV store.
Hey, folks, like we were saying, General Flynn just came back from touring the entire country. He's got a lot of great stuff, not only the DVDs, but he's got books, he's got memorabilia. Go to patriottv.store. You're going to see all those goodies up there. A lot of great things, great gifts, good stuff, particularly anything to support the cause. And General Flynn is a great American. Okay, now back to you, Joe and Lee. Okay, let's just for a minute take some of these issues at hand. Little known fact, nobody saw it, Joe. The United States has approved Ukraine to launch attacks deeper into Russia with some of the weapons it previously said you can't do that. Joe, you first and then Lee, what's the potential implication of that? Because some European countries said yes, others said no. But now the United States quietly in this news cycle has said yes.
Boy, and you ask if there's going to be an election. Just think about this. Russia strikes back. I mean, they've got the hypersonic missiles. There's just about nothing they can do if they're pushed against the wall. And now that we're going to put our bombs in their territory. You know what? When I said pray, because basically if you're sitting at home or you're listening in your car, we need to pray because we are now being led by people that want to destroy the world, not just America, and put this world in World War III. And we don't know who they are because we know it's not Biden. He's just not even a figurehead. And we're beyond the pale at this point. And just pray for America right now. That's all I can say. And get prepared because this summer and this fall are going to be like nothing we've ever seen.
Yeah. And Lee, again, no one's talking about this because this hit during the Trump news cycle. But this is not a riskless strategy that the Biden administration is authorizing the Ukrainians. And while the Biden administration is doing that, again, our ally Israel is still fighting in Gaza, taking out terrorists in tunnels on a daily basis. you're not hearing much support of Israel at all. And if anything else, the Biden administration almost, they're trying to balance it, but it almost seems they're more pro-Hamas than pro-Israel.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're exactly right on that account. I'm actually embarrassed by that. I think one of our staunchest allies, we have sort of turned to the side on them at the very best. But I think you're right, more turn our back on them. And you think about it. We just threw away $400 million on a pier that doesn't work, a lily pad that floated away during a storm, right? So think about from the Afghanistan withdrawal to now, how pathetic the military operation has been under Joe Biden. And I also agree with you. He has nothing to do with decision making. We all know that. So whoever he has surrounded himself with that, has the stars and the stripes on their lapels, etc., they're doing a terrible, terrible job navigating the military during, the last 3 or 4 years. It's really been really bad. And, again, we need to stand with Israel. What's going on in Ukraine, that's a border skirmish. And I keep hearing this over and over again about, well, if we don't stop Russia, they'll go on and they'll go to the next. They're not going to go to any next country. This is it. This is all about a deep water port that they want. It's a border skirmish that if Trump was in office or any other president maybe was in office, this thing would already have been negotiated out and be done. So I completely put the blame of that on Biden. And as far as Israel goes, and a complete embarrassment on the world stage.
Well, and you bring up a great point there. And, obviously, it's not Biden's fault that a pier floated away, but again, it symbolizes his administration, that White House approved this boondoggle, and they couldn't even build a damn pier, that worked. And now it's floating apart. Aid's not getting in. It seems like everything this guy touches turns to stone. Joe,
Jimmy Carter. We remember.
Joe, listen, with all due respect, Jimmy Carter is way better than Joe Biden. At least Jimmy Carter was a moral man that had a moral compass to him.
The rescue mission over there. You remember that?
I know what you're referring to. Similar
situation. In that case, our military wasn't built up. In this case, we've got a strong military, and we're using it either incorrectly or not the right proper procedure.
No question. I want to tie, we got a couple minutes left. I want to tie, most elections, folks, are not decided by foreign policy, trials, foreign adventurism. Most elections come down to economic issues. And Joe Visconti, right now in this country, consumer prices are high. They're not going down. The PCE, personal consumption expenditures, came out 2.7% annual basis. Economists had hoped it might come down. Joe and Lee, again, for all the turmoil that Trump has been under, he's still leading Biden in the polls. The economy is still inflationary. Can we get to a point, Joe and Lee, a couple minutes left to close it out, where economic issues will override these political issues?
Well, credit card debt, we go back to that for the last 2 years on your show. Credit card debt, people can't pay their balances, 35% interest. It's compounding. COVID knocked them out already. And now the utilities right here in Connecticut, Eversource, if you have electricity, they've been bailing so many people out that the general public is going to pay like $48 a month for 10 months just to bail out the people that bailed out. So your utilities by themselves, energy, is insane. Never mind rent and the mortgage. Car insurance is everywhere. Everybody knows that it's not going away. They want the Trump economy back. That's what all I'm hearing from everybody. They want the Trump economy back. They're willing to hold their nose if they don't like him, his personality. They want it back. Can't afford it. We cannot afford 4 more years of Joe Biden. We'll all be on welfare with the illegal aliens. Everybody will be.
Lee, what are your listeners telling you about the economy?
Well, they're struggling. I think everybody's struggling. Every end of the week, you get your paycheck and you try to stretch it as far as you can. And by the time the next week comes rolling around, you got a lot less in your pocket. I saw a stat the other day, $315 trillion the world has as far as debt right now. It's $315 trillion. All I could do is be infuriated, because if we had better leadership from 2020 on, think about it, we would have so much more money at our disposal, paying, like, we wouldn't be racking up this ridiculous debt. In other words, we're just going along with the rest of the planet and racking up debt when we could have been going in the other direction, building the infrastructure that we had needed, but doing it in a more cost-effective way. So, it's disappointing where we are, I think, in the economy, but as far as just family, the households, every single household is struggling. When you look at just grocery store products, they want to give you this illusion that they're only up a few percentage points. No, when you start from 2020 to now, you're talking about 50% in a lot of cases. That food prices 50% higher. Go try to buy a box of cereal or mayonnaise or milk. It's all astronomically high, and people are suffering because of it. And they're using, as Joe said, their credit card to get to the end of the week, which is why credit card debt is through the roof.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. We got about a minute left for each of you. Okay, now we've had the verdict. Now we're getting ready to go into a debate, then the sentencing. One thing about doing shows, you can make predictions, and it's in the can. Joe, I'm going to start with you, Lee, and then I'll close it out. In the presidential election, will Donald Trump still be elected president, even if he's incarcerated?
Yes, I'm on the record on that. Last year when they first arrested him in one case, even if he was in prison, even if they do that to him and Supreme Court doesn't hear it, he's going to win. It's going to be odd. We're going to be running his campaign. We're all going to be running his campaign. We're all running for president if they put him in jail. That's what's coming. Pretty sure that's what's coming. Pray to God people aren't violent, and we just pick up and we volunteer to work with the campaign while he sits in a cell and rots until November.
Same question to you, Lee.
So I say yes to that, and my caveat is this. So I had mentioned this to Joe earlier. We might have to send Joe in, a.k.a. Escape from New York, as Snake Plissken, to get out Donald Trump if, in fact, he gets incarcerated. So, Joe, get ready, get your eye patch on, get in there and go save Donald Trump, escape from New York, all right?
I'll give you my thoughts on it. And I happen to agree with both you guys. And I want to add a couple things to it. Going into this trial, when you start hearing states like Minnesota's in play, New Hampshire's in play, Virginia's in play, and the fact that I really believe this, the vast overwhelming majority of Americans, this trial is not going to affect their decision to vote. Yes, there's some undecideds. Yes, there could be a 1 or 2 point shift in a tight election. That could mean something. But I'm in Joe's camp and I'm in Lee's camp. I don't think this is really close. But I am aware of this. The Democratic Party will do everything they can to remain in power. And as many of us, Lee, Joe, and I have talked about, it's every conservative's responsibility to get out and vote, bring your friends to the polls, get people registered. And I really believe that when the groundswell of support happens for the president, I see these poll numbers increasing because you know what? A lot of Americans, they understand fairness and they understand right from wrong. And a lot of Americans are sitting there right now saying, you know what? If I was in his shoes, I wouldn't feel real good about this. And they look, I'm not talking about the hardcore 10, 20% of leftists that want him in jail. I'm talking about the 80% of the American public that has a fair mind and looks at things realistically. I think if Donald Trump stays on the issues that are important to the American people, whether he's given probation, whether he's given a minimal sentence, whether they throw the book at him, whether he's in Mar-a-Lago, he will be reelected president because I believe the American public does not view this as the right outcome. And that's what I'm sticking with, echoing the thoughts of my two fellow guests. Joe and Lee, thank you both for joining me this particular amazing point in time weekend. We want to thank General Michael Flynn for use of his studios here in Venice to record this show. What a great American. It's a pleasure to work with him on Patriot TV. We'll be back next week. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening. We'll be talking soon.